Hi guys, in this video I would like to show you how I created this environment scene and the assets used in it. I'm going to explain you my creation process on the tower, from the concept and idea to the texturing and final asset integration into the game engine. Also, I'll be showing you the workflow used for the other assets like rocks and foliage and my approach on the overall style and mood of the scene. Okay, so the tower changed a bit from its original design, which I drew like 5 years ago, and went from this concept to this final concept. I didn't plan to have an environment scene, I just wanted to make the tower as close as possible to the hero of the storm art style. So I started to gather many references, mainly from the game itself and from the building from the game, and from Michael Vicente portfolio and some of Nicolas Raid and Ranko browser like this one. Okay, so after I had the concept done, I just started the blocking of the tower by starting with some basic shapes, like cylinders for this part of the tower, or some boxes or planes for the main building, or like this part here. I'm taking in consideration at this point just the overall shape and silhouette based on the concept I have. After a first pass on the blocking, I just start adding some details like some bolts, windows, some bricks, metal bars to help me understand better the shape of the overall building, and again taking care of the silhouettes of the model. One thing to take in consideration is to think which mesh do I need and how do I need them for the sculpting stage. For example, I have these bricks with some beveled edge, which is gonna help me later. These bricks have some beveling too, and this one. Also, an important thing is the modularity, because I wanted to make this tower with a unique texture. So I had to start to think which mesh could be optimized and which could be repeated. For example, this whole tower is repeated here, here, and here. Also, this mesh is repeated, and the bolts and these bricks. Okay, so once I have the blocking done, I bring everything into Zbrush and start separating the pieces. As you can see here, for example, this tower is just one subtool with many polygroups. So I start separating the polygroups as I need. I do like a third polish pass here in Zbrush, where I can start adding some creases to the edges. I use the dynamic subdivisions, so that way I can preview the subdivisions in my mesh, and I could make some extra adjustments to the shape in case I need to do that. You can see here that I made the telescope a little bit bigger, and some of the shapes I made them a little bit bigger as well. Okay, so once I'm happy with the result from the blocking, I just start sculpting based on the style I'm looking for and based on the references. I add some subdivision and start giving the pieces some sculpt details. I used the trim dynamic brush, for example here, on the mainly on the edges and the corners, to help them break a little bit more and give some damaging. Also, I use some damaging here on the walls and this part here, for example, where the metal it's contacting the walls and inserting to the walls, and here the insertion between the bricks. I give some carving, some damaging using the clay brush and the trim dynamic brush. You can see here as well on this part, for example, I start adding some carving, and same as the wall, some damaging here. Also, after looking at the references, I start adding on the go some new pieces, for example like this banner here, and some metal parts like this detail, and these ones, which I did directly here on inside Zbrush. I finished the sculpt by giving some final pass to the pieces, by doing some details using, for example, this brush, the art rock detail on the walls and the rock parts like this one, to give this, to achieve this rocky detail. And also I start adding some like this one, some holes, small holes on the walls, on the rocks, by using the edge polish with a low focal shift and small amount of the size of the brush. Also, I start adding some cracks and some carving using the orb crack brush, and also I start adding some slashes to the metal parts, some holes in the bolts, some slashes on the woods, and that kind of detail. As you can see here, I give some bolts sculpt and some slashes as well using the orb slash, mainly the clean slashes. And also here on the bolts you can see that have some insertion detail. Quick tip before moving forward: I had to spend some time trying to define the materials used in the building. For example, I try to pick up this kind of reference where I grab this metal, this combination, for example, of this rocky wall with some metal and these bricks. So I try to use this as a reference for my building and apply the same here. For example, this metal on the tower, on the corner, together with these bricks and all that stuff. Once I have my sculpt done, I just organize my folder based on what I need to bake. For example, you can see here I group them by this part, like 4 different folders. Marmoset Toolbag lets you create baking groups, so this way it's easier to manage the pieces and have better results. But before doing any bakes, we need to do the retopology and the UV mapping. So I just merge those folders and I just stick with this, measure these subtools, and I just apply the decimation master to each one of these subtools to bring them to Maya. Retopology in this case is quite straightforward. In general, I do the new topology as separate pieces, as you can see here, that everything has its own mesh clipping with the others, and except for some of the pieces like these ones that have the rocky parts with the metal welded together, and also this base, this column here, and this is just to avoid some artifacts and have some smooth normals on the bakings. After the topology is done, I start to split and open the UVs. Note that in most of the cases I just try to have my shells my edges on the shells like rectified. At this point I can start making some baking test, and if nothing is too damaged I just start to polish the baking with the Marmoset Toolbag tool. For example, these two, the offset and the skew tools. Also remember to keep the same groups in the low poly as the ones in the sculpt. Alright, topology done, UVs done, and baking done. It's time to duplicate the parts that should be overlapping the UVs. As you can see here, I have the repeated parts here highlighted. So this part should be the overlaps in the UV. If you do this after the bakes are done, you're getting sure that those UVs are going to be overlapped and won't have any baking issues. As you can see here, I have my instances or repeated parts inside Marmoset Toolbag as well. Once we have the model ready, I just make sure to freeze the transform here and just make sure to have my pivot in the center of the scene. With this done, we can export this to Substance Painter and the texture maps we baked as well. So here in Substance Painter I have my textures loaded and I have my mesh imported into the scene. Okay, with everything set up, we can start adding the basic colors. At this point, I bring back again my references because I think sculpting and texturing are the key stages to achieve the stylized look that I'm looking for. In this case, I try to match the goals of, for example, this model, these references, and the metal to this one. The gray metal with that bluish tones. I also try to match the shingles to these ones here. I like the style and the color tone here. And because I have three types of walls, I try to do a mixture between this wall color here and this one, and maybe some lighter tone like this one. Okay, now that we have these base colors, I just start giving some details. For example, here in this material, I just add a base light. In this case, because I have the material applied on the bottom part here in this part and this part. Also, I have this applied to the top part of the building. So I wanted to give a kind of a gradient effect from the top to the bottom. Also, I added a kind of a grunge color pass that is affecting the color and the roughness channel. After that, I just added multiplied, or no, it's in normal blending with a low, a little bit less opacity. I just using the AO mask that we baked with a darker tone. Same for the edge. I'm using the curvature mask, and oops, I just do the same but with a sharper mask using the same curvature texture. Then I give some cavity with a multiply